that he broke in. So Friday the 13th, 2019 is when he broke in.
It's really crazy because he actually had a few different interactions, like where he either dealt with the police or had the police like called on him on that day. One of my neighbors saw him following kids home from school and walking around without a shirt on. And
peeking in windows.
Yeah, peeking in windows. She called the police, and they said, essentially it's not illegal to be weird, and nothing happened. So it's kind of wild that
in Hawaii they kind of have that stance too.
Yeah, it's more laid back.
I actually have a friend who it's not entirely similar, but a homeless man entered his home, and he came home and he ended up just giving the guy some cereal, and the police came, and they didn't arrest him. They put him on a 72-hour psych hold, which I think happens a lot in Hawaii because they'd rather keep their crime stats down.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of people and a lot of criminals, if it's not overtly violent, they will just put them on the 72-hour holds, and it's not, no arrest record or anything like that. So.
But now let me ask James, if he's wearing your clothes, where was his clothes?
I don't recall finding it. Oh, I'm sorry, you asked James.
Well, either one of you. You're both there.
Yeah, I don't recall finding any of his clothing.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, he was also, while he was in the house, he wore my clothes too.
Really?
We found piles of clothing where he had been wearing like my undergarments with James's clothes over the top. I found a few like T-shirts of mine that he had worn. So
I had my house wasn't even broken into this way. It was a housekeeper stole from me, and I felt so violated in my own home. You just feel a violation. That your kingdom there has been penetrated. I could only imagine what you guys. This must have been so traumatic.
Yeah, and I think, for me, one of the really emotional things is that he destroyed things, and he did disgusting things, like left bodily fluids on sentimental items.
Oh.
I had a stuffed animal that one of our sons had won for me from Dave & Buster's, and there was bodily fluids all over it. I think that's I still tear up thinking about that sometimes. Like this person was just a disgusting person.
Now, how did you discover all that? Because you said the cops won't let you in right away. When did you discover the severity of what went on?
So right after the police finished their investigation, I went in briefly, and we just enough to see, okay, this is a crime scene. Everything's all our belongings are everywhere. They dusted for fingerprints, and that's all over the place. You've got the bodily fluids, you've got
excrement.
Yeah, excrement. All these things that are just disgusting. And the police officer just tells me, "Hey, why don't you guys go get something to eat? Get out of here for a little bit. Come back, do an inventory report, and let me know what happened." So they told us. One question that we did have for them was, what happens if we find any drugs? And they're like, "Oh, just throw them away."
Really?
It's like, okay.
There was no crime scene cleanup for us at all. Like a lot of people think that's a thing.
Yeah.
No, not in our case.
Yeah, sometimes it's worse for them to fingerprint because they get that stuff all over the place. It's impossible to get it off.
Oh.
They fingerprinted, didn't they?
Yeah, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
It was in the laundry room, the kitchen, the bedroom, everywhere.
Was there any indication of other people being there besides this Mr. Zahas?
Yeah, actually, so our neighbor had reported a domestic disturbance. These were newer neighbors. They didn't know us very well. They didn't know that we were out of town, and they heard a pretty violent argument between a man and a woman. They heard two different voices in our home, and, they called security because they thought that James was beating me because they didn't know that they thought we were in the home and they didn't know us. So we have a witness that saw another woman in the home or that heard a woman in the home. And then additionally, in Ezekiel's notes, he writes about having a party and working with a group.
Yeah, and he talks about another person and all that. So his notes are a mixture between observation, pure like psychotic fantasy, I guess, and all that.
His plans.
His plan. And plans.
Because he wanted to do medical surgery on YouTube.
That's correct. He was planning different types of surgeries, and he was looking that up via our kids' browser. So I should mention we dropped the kids off after we spoke with the police in
a safe spot.
With some family friends. We just ran and got some Jamba Juice, came home, and then started our cleanup, and that's when Brittany found the computer upstairs.
Yeah, so upstairs, our bed, the only way that I can think of the thing that I always think of to liken it to is in the TV show Dexter, how he'd set up his little, like, kill areas. Our bed was kind of set up like that, not with, like, the plastic on it or anything, but just kind of with, like, knives next to the bed. And then several of our computers that previously hadn't worked were actually sitting on the bed, and I thought that was really strange. One was sitting open, so I kind of ran my finger on the trackpad, and this text file pops up on the screen, and I start reading through it, and I realized very quickly it was a manifesto / journal that this person had been keeping in his home, and I quickly saw that there were notes about us that made it very clear that he'd actually been watching us for a while. Both James and I and the children, he'd been watching our whole family. So I get really upset, and I don't want to read the rest of it, so I kind of just give it to James, and I'm like, hey, do you know anything about this? And yeah, so that's how we found the manifesto.
Right, so I went upstairs, and this manifesto is called The Omnivore Trials of Rehabilitation for Rat-Like Creatures.
And our neighbor actually saw him outside of our house typing on the computer. So,
You're saying, but he repaired these computers? They weren't working?
So I'm not sure what he did. He may have only done like a factory reset. It was an old MacBook that I had, and it was just something that we hadn't been using for a long time. I think that he might have only just done a factory reset of it. But then he was using the guest account on it to type these notes. And it wasn't connected to the internet or anything because we had the password and all that. So he wasn't connected online with that.
But he did go online on our Xbox that was in the family room.
Right. But these notes were, I mean, there's so much stuff in them, like from talking about children being the Antichrist, the strange spiritual ideas about not being human, and he wanted to do these surgeries, and there's a lot of things like he wanted to do on Brittany.
He wrote about how our family was a very attractive family and a perfect family, but that he could further improve us through surgery and spiritual enlightenment. And he actually he wanted to do a hand transplant on me. Apparently my hands were made of pink chicken-like flesh, and he wanted to do a sexual reassignment surgery on me. And he'd actually looked up online how to perform these different surgeries and tried to order a surgical bed and different, surgical tools. So this was a real plan that he had.
What do we know about this guy's history, his childhood, his family?
I know quite a bit about his history. So I do know that Ezekiel, he's not from Hawaii, so he was from Bridgetown, Connecticut. His family's religious and in like I would say a small sect of Christianity. His mom was some form of pastor at their church. his dad had passed away. I'm not sure how his dad passed away, but the date is interesting because it was October 31st of 2012, I believe. His dad passed away. His brother and his dad, I believe, had some sort of burglary charges in their history. And Ezekiel, from recent times, like from the couple years before the incident, so the incident happened in September 2019, he had just released a rap album. And in that rap album, he's talking about being a prophet. He's talking about seeing who are the strangers behind the curtains, and stuff that sounds, when you make music, you can say almost anything, and it's, oh, well, this is my art. Yeah. But a lot of these things are red flags when you look at them in retrospect.
A lot of the stuff you read about was really similar to what he actually ended up doing.
Now, the spelling of his name Ezekiel is unusual. What nationality is this guy? Like Haitian or something?
He's Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican, really? Okay. And any kind of a Santeria type of connection?
I can't. I really can't place exactly where his religious beliefs are, except for they're kind of the esoteric religious beliefs, sort of like, the people who are saying we're all living in the Matrix. The world's not real, and he thinks he's a different, other dimensional being, and some of those different species. In fact, he called us, he lists that we're a species called omnivores, hence the title of his notes, The Omnivore Trials, and he simply says that he wants to transform us to Ezekiel's, which is him. So he talks about not being human and this not being reality. But it lines up with a lot of some of the recent esoteric beliefs that have come out, similar, like, I guess you could say some of the QAnon type things and some of the things that have come up.
Now, you have a friend or an associate or something, and she became aware of this story, and she told you to contact me. How do I fit into all this? What makes me the expert on this stuff?
So, actually, it's not. So, and I'll just say it. I was in a PTSD treatment program through the military, and it's just, you go to groups and do yoga, that type of stuff. And one of the nurses there heard my story. I don't even remember her name, but we had a pretty in-depth conversation about everything. And she's like, you need to contact Ed Offerman. He's a good guy. He's done private detective work for years. And I believe she said that you've written a book, or you've discussed with other authors and things like that. And so she just said, you're the guy to contact.
Yeah. So you're lucky me, right? Lucky it out.
Yeah. So, I was actually so when I contacted you, it was less on the radio side or the trying to get an interview or anything, but it was more on I've never contacted a private investigator before, but it was kind of just I wonder what would happen if I contacted you.
And here we are. Okay. Now, when you mentioned PTSD, this had to have aggravated PTSD. This is a hugely traumatic situation.
Everyone in our family now is what is the word? I can't think of the word.
Traumatized.
Well, everybody officially has PTSD in our family. We all have doctors who said that we have PTSD. I went to a PTSD inpatient facility. James has. This really did a number on all of us, and it's still you know, I used to be a model. I used to work events. I used to bartend, and I can't even imagine going back to this line of going back